The queen of hot topics and celebrity gossip, Wendy Williams is always ready to talk.
We recall meeting your wife on her back.
Yeah.
Terry Crews spoke out on Good Morning America, alleging he was sexually assaulted last February. I was asked in my meeting this morning, do I think it was brave of him to come out? I said, no, it's not brave. He's just talking.
The top radio personalities in the country are all men. Howard Stern, Don Imus, Tom Joyner, and so on. I am the top woman, nationally, even before syndication. In terms of money, in terms of industry recognition and prestige, I am number one. Yes, people know Robin quivers, and perhaps Robin even makes more money than I do, but she is not in my class because she is riding the coattails of a major male jock, Howard Stern. I know there are quite a few women in other markets holding down their spot on their own merits, but none are doing what I'm doing in the media capital of the world, New York City. This was a statement made by shock jock radio personality Wendy Williams. Wendy was born on July 18, 1964 in New Jersey, to parents Thomas and Shirley, a sophisticated couple who made it their mission to give their children the best. Growing up, the family lived in Wayside, New Jersey, an upper-middle-class community which was predominantly white. To the outside world, they were a perfect family, living an ideal life. The children went to a great school, had a nanny, and were often gifted diamonds and pearls and designer bags. Wendy compared her childhood to that of the Huxtables from The Cosby Show, and often said that her childhood was perfect. In her book, Wendy's Got the Heat, she wrote, "My parents worked very hard to give all of us a solid foundation. They worked extremely hard to make sure none of us wanted for anything. My parents always traveled in the right circle. They were involved in many social activities and charities, and they had plenty of prominent friends."
Number one, Elizabeth, New Jersey is like a second home to my childhood. My mom was birthed in Elizabeth. She graduated from Baton High School in Elizabeth. My grandfather owned the whole block where their house was. Like, you know, he had the block plus a trucking company where he was like the main trucker for Sears when Sears was lit. I don't know whether Sears is still open, but
There's one in Stockton, California.
I was going to say, is there still a Sears?
Yes, they have lawnmowers.
Okay. But back in the day, Sears had everything, clothing, lawnmowers, washing machines. My grandfather had a trucking company. And so if you can't tell by my mother's demeanor, she kind of grew up royalty. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Because she was a silver spoon kid?
Paris in the spring.
Oh, yeah. They had money.
Nice.
But with her mother, you know, Papa would stay behind and, you know, do the trucks and collect the rent on the block and, you know, all that stuff.
Though Wendy lived a very privileged life, there were some issues. At her school, she was one of 4 Black students and considered to be a misfit. She wasn't a bright student like her older sister Wanda and was labeled academically challenged. In addition to this, Wendy had a weight problem. It was something that everyone seemed to point out. Her teachers, her parents, her siblings, and her friends. Wendy was a big girl, standing at 5'11" and taller than most boys in her class. This made Wendy feel extremely self-conscious and insecure. Mrs. McCarthy, my 6th grade gym teacher, announced my height and weight in front of the whole class during health class for a fitness exam. It was one of the most humiliating experiences of my school life. While she weighed everyone and announced everyone's height and weight, it seemed as if when she got to mine, time stood still, and everyone's ears perked up to hear. I wasn't obese by any stretch, but my weight, which was among the heaviest in my class, caused quite a few snickers and few wisecracks.
I had to fake confidence until I actually believed it. And unfortunately, that meant being very introspective and missing out on a lot of the things that kids participated in. Like, I've never been to a prom. I don't know what that's like. I was tall and I was overweight, and I was reminded of that by my siblings and my parents every single day. And so I was a bit of an outcast. I wasn't fat. I was Zoftic. I was only fat to my parents and to these stupid boys in my stupid town where I was growing up, where, perhaps a Zoftic woman is not the ideal beauty. But them 25-year-olds and 30 and 40-year-olds at the mall, I'm not upset with how I grew up. It was perfect. It was perfect. But perfection is also an illusion. And so when it came time for me to get out in the world and figure things out on my own, I had a lot of catching up to do.
In her book, Wendy's Got the Heat, she details her body issues as it's been something she struggled with all her life. In the first grade, her parents put her on a very strict diet. For lunch, instead of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, Wendy would get a small can of tuna with mustard. By the second grade, her parents added a bit more to her meal. Quote, "By the second grade, my mother got a little generous and added a slice of Pepper Ridge Farm wheat bread, the real thin bread, but I only got that once a week. I never had chips or cookies or anything like that. After the tuna and mustard diet, then there was the Carnation Instant Breakfast diet. Carnation for breakfast and lunch and a sensible dinner, which would consist of a piece of fish or meat the size of the palm of my hand, vegetables, and a salad with light dressing. Then there was the broil everything diet and the no bread diet where I only ate salads. When none of that worked, my parents resorted to the humiliating Friday morning weigh-ins. They made me get on a scale every Friday. When the weight was not coming off, they even tried teasing. My mother would say, 'You know, Wendy, I just bought you those size 12s and now we have to take them back and get a 13. What are you going to do next, girl?' This weight thing got so bad, by the time I got to high school, I was bulimic. I also wet the bed until I was about 12. When my parents found out, I got in trouble, and somehow they managed to blame the bedwetting on my weight. 'You know, your weight is putting pressure on your bladder,' my mother would say. Mothers want their daughters to be in the image of them. My sister Wanda was the perfect image of my mother, a cotillion queen. I looked nothing like my mother. Both my parents were weight conscious, even to this day."
Wendy was bigger than the other children in her class. Wendy was overweight.
Oh, yes, yes.
And she knew it.
Yes.
Wendy has worked on her weight all through the years. She's had problems dealing with her weight. But now, look at her. She has a beautiful figure.
Weight has always been a big deal to me. And that seed was planted, growing up. I remember my first diet in first grade. Tuna fish and mustard in a plastic container. A few grapes on the side. And that's it. I'd have to take the money off my father's dresser, the change, and I would eat school lunch. I'd eat the tuna fish mustard, pull out my change, have an ice cream sandwich, chocolate milk, the whole bit. My father, the first man who loves you, the first message about my weight is, "Wendy, you have such a pretty face if you just lose some weight." I would get weighed constantly by my mother and father.
One of Wendy's tricks, step on the scale, and then she would lean to one side so that the needle would move downward instead of upward.
It might have been maybe too many mashed potatoes.
To cope with the shame and humiliation she felt due to her body issues and poor academic career, Wendy turned to drugs and alcohol. In high school, cannabis became her best friend, confidant, and companion. She would take this habit with her to college at Northeastern in Boston. While there, Wendy didn't fit in socially or academically. Drugs were her only source of comfort. But one night, during a drug-induced haze, Wendy would happen upon her calling. "I was sitting on the fire escape outside of my dorm room, taking a bottle of Old English to the head. It was freshman week, and while every other freshman was at the welcome to the school parties, I was in my usual place, alone. So there I was on the fire escape with my best friend, me, getting effed up on some cannabis and Old E, straight out the bottle. I decided to check out the radio stations around Boston when I came across the campus radio station WRBB. There was a disc jockey on named Irving. For kicks, I decided I would call him. He invited me to the station, which was across campus. Wendy made her way to the campus station and was blown away at what she saw. Initially intimidated with all the buttons and technology, Wendy soon became fascinated. She would develop a friendship with Irving, who would then show her the ropes and what it took to be a DJ. From there, Wendy became the newscaster for her college campus and learned the ins and outs of radio. She graduated from Northeastern in 4 years, though it was a 5-year school. Upon her graduation, Wendy landed her first job as a DJ on St. Croix in the Virgin Islands. It wasn't ideal, but it would suffice for the time being. Again, this station wasn't Wendy's dream job, as she had her sights set for the hit station Hot 103. Her time in DC would give her the opportunity to establish herself as a serious disc jockey and prove to her peers that she was someone they ought to know. But Wendy would also find herself going down a very dangerous path when she upped her habit of cannabis to cocaine. It was the late 80s, and Wendy's addiction began taking over her life. During this time, I was on a coke diet that made me really slim. Coke made my weight a non-issue, and I very much liked that. I had dropped 50 pounds in no time at all. I started out in DC about a size 16, but within 2 months, I was down to a size 6. My shift was from 3 in the afternoon until 7. I would do coke after my shift practically all night. Around this time, I found myself getting wooed by an attractive, prominent man, a budding R&B singer. So while I'm interviewing this singer, I am not surprised that he's flirting with me. After the interview, he asked me to go out with him, and I said, sure. He had a limo waiting for me when I ended my shift. We went out to dinner. After dinner, we were supposed to go to one of those glamorous industry parties in DC. He told me that he needed to stop off at his hotel to change his clothes, and he invited me up. We get up to the room, and he starts changing his clothes. He starts taking off his pants right there. After he took his pants off, he approached me as I was sitting on his bed, and he forced himself on me. He didn't wear a condom, and I didn't scratch and fight. I was date raped. After he finished, I left.
Early in my radio career, there was this artist, and he had the #1 song on the R&B charts at the time. He came and did an interview on my radio show, and he asked me out for dinner. So I said, yeah. Then after that, he wanted to go change for his own party. And when we went to his hotel, he invited me to his room, and I went. And he goes in the bathroom to, do whatever he does. When he comes out, he's got like nothing on, a pair of boxers. And I'm like, okay, what's about to happen? My dumb behind, instead of just getting up and walking out, I'm like, okay, let me see how far this is going to go. I don't want to have the sex. I don't want to be involved with an artist. So he ended up pushing himself on me, and he did me. And I left after that and went home and scrubbed my skin off, cried. That was that.
This assault was very traumatic for Wendy, though she never showed it or confided in anyone. In her book, she writes about how numb she was to it all. Quote, "We never made it to that party. This man said nothing to me, and I said nothing to him. I just got up and left. There were no tears. I didn't call anyone. I didn't run downstairs crying through the lobby disheveled. I simply left. I know I was raped, but I don't compare it to the kinds of rape women experience around the world. I wasn't brutalized in an alley. My clothes weren't torn. I went for an AIDS test for approximately 4 months steadily afterward. This was within my first 2 months of living in DC, and it was the height of the AIDS scare. To this day, I never found out if this was that singer's MO, to attack unsuspecting young girls, and I never shared the experience with anyone. I was too embarrassed. I thought people might have said that I asked for it. They might ask, what was I doing in his hotel room? Or say, you're a cokehead. Yes, a naive cokehead, but a cokehead all the same. So I couldn't tell anyone.
Being dated by an R&B singer whose name is Sherrick.
Oh.
I didn't feel as though it was necessary to say his name because my life is so good, and he's dead.
Oh, wow.
Well, he's dead.
Oh.
I'm sure he had kids and maybe a wife, grandchildren. He was older than me, so that means he'd probably be about 63 or 65 at this point. I bring that man down when my life is so up.
Yeah. Was it hard for you to deal with that, or did you just kind of
at the time?
At the time, how did you process what happened?
I went home and scrubbed my body like a lot of women do. I did not go to the hospital for date it because I was embarrassed too. I didn't call any girlfriends because they would say, well, what were you wearing?
Right.
And my body was covered. I was not wearing anything. This is Wendy pre-surgery. This is Wendy, like 1988. His hit song, which was #1 on the R&B charts, Call Me. He was just released from jail. He was a really good singer, 6'5", looked like a DeBarge. and so the record label saw him and said, we're going to make a star out of you. And he had a beautiful voice. And he was in town to do his record release party, and he invited me to be his date. Well, I'm a young girl. I'm like, yeah. And I hadn't even gotten my surgery yet. Yes. So, you know, he asked me to come back to the hotel with him so he can quickly change into his outfit that he wanted to wear to the party. And that's where the date happened. Was it my fault? No, it wasn't my fault. But what other women need to understand, especially young girls, be careful who you're around. Because I'm lucky I wasn't gang. These guys, they will pile on you 5 at a time and leave you for dead and think nothing about it and do it raw dog, use no condoms. Yeah, there was no condom involved. Use no condoms and not care about you. I left that hotel room crying, dried my tears, walked through the lobby with my head down. I wasn't popular on the radio in Washington, D.C., but I was cute. And I walked to my Subaru. I took a taxi cab home because we'd gotten there in his limousine to his hotel and went home, and I called my father, and I didn't tell my father about it. I just called my father.
Yeah.
What Cher did to Wendy back in 1988 wouldn't be the first time she was taken advantage of. In her book, Wendy writes that during her college days, one of her so-called friends harmed her too. These experiences fueled Wendy's addiction. Like cannabis, coke became her best friend. The white lady, she would call it.
You know, I also knew that I loved to party, and I would just take my party on the road with me, if you know what I'm saying. And I think you do.
I saw a lot of cocaine in the movie too, Wendy. That took me off. I saw a lot of cocaine in the movie, boy. I was like, was it like that?
Well,
yeah.
There were a lot of drugs back in that day, and for me, that was my company up and down the road, my company in the apartment. It became better company than my friends who do not understand the radio life that I lived, the life of a public figure. And then to get even deeper into it, they didn't understand. They understood the coke. It's not like I had regular people who I called friends who didn't know coke, but they didn't have the money for, an 8-ball. Every other day.
Every other day. Damn.
Yeah. So I do it myself. And then, as broadcasters, we don't want bronchitis. We don't want a deviated septum. We don't want nosebleeds. So I learned how to cook it. It was as good to me as Heather B. Salmon. She makes a mean salmon.
Yeah, she got a busy salmon. I can vouch for that.
On October 30th, 1988, while knee-deep into her addiction, Wendy got a call from Hot 103, her dream job. They offered her the overnight shift starting at midnight on Sunday to 5:30 Monday morning. She accepted. Wendy was still working in D.C. at the time and would bounce between both stations. Her work schedule was hectic. To cope with the pace of it, her coke addiction worsened. Quote, I was not only transporting large quantities of the white lady with me on trips, I was actually getting high in the studio while on the air. I even developed a routine. By 2 a.m, after I finished my second shift, I would take a break. I would go to the ladies' room, take a couple of hits, and be nice and high for a couple of hours.
I did overnights, which is the worst time on any radio station. It became, all right, you got to stay up. So I started doing a lot of coke. I mean, not a lot at times, but, like a pile of Peru. That wasn't me. But I got high like 5 days a week. I did it for years. It was no big deal. And no big deal became a big deal. There was one particular night, I could go to the bathroom, standing at the mirror, take my hit, pass all the way out, down to the ground. My head hit the wall. And I woke up. There was nobody at the station. I could have been dead or whatever. Like, it's a miracle I'm sitting here now, actually.
While splitting her time between 2 stations, Wendy was offered a full-time position at Hot 103, which at that point was Hot 97. After working there for 2 years, Wendy was unexpectedly fired. She would move to WPLJ and take over the evening shift from 10 to 2 in the morning. Not long after, she was offered a part-time position at KISS and took it. There, Wendy began to establish her trademark content and radio personality when she introduced the segment Dish in the Dirt. Quote, "That was the early version of what I'm most known for today. I would read the papers and report the dealings of celebrities, and I would go to the parties and do my celebrity spottings and let the audience know what was going on at the parties too. After 1 year, I got my own shift, 6 to 10 in the evening. It was the latter part of 1990, and I was being paid $60,000 plus appearances plus Nutrisystem money. I expanded my Dish in the Dirt to my night show, where celebrities would frequent the studio for interviews, and I developed my style of high drama and scandalosity. I was having a ball."
I was hired at KISS, and I got my chance. I was never the best jock. I guess I'm not the best TV person either. But when opportunity presents itself, you got to get ready to hop on it. And that was me.
My name is Wendy Williams. Thanks so much for spending time with us. I'm from the East Coast, but these are the West Coast All-Stars. We're all in the same gang on KISS.
Wendy would come in before her shift, and she had a big bag, and in that bag was every gossip rag you could think of. She would sit there, she would go through everything, highlight what was going on, and bring those topics to the radio.
That's the beginning of Hot Topics. And New York ate it up. People loved it. People loved it because I delivered it, but I delivered it with a flair. Like, you might not care about this story, but I'm going to deliver it in such a way you're going to care. Because you could say, well, I don't like her. Why is she gossiping? Because nobody else is.
When she started to really take off, yes, it was when hip hop was really in its ascendancy. And she was on a station at that time that allowed her to interact with artists a little bit more. And then her personality really started to develop.
There was a transition from Wendy, this naive girl, to shock jock. That was a transition. Like, it always wasn't like that. I think it was sort of like that, but it was, okay, now I understand that this works and I'm going to roll with it in my way. And that's what Wendy did. Nobody was really covering the dirt on the black artists like that. Who was having sex with who and who was doing this and who was doing that. What she says, how she can tease it and bring you into it. That's a talent. That's not something you could teach somebody to do.
As Wendy began establishing herself in the industry, she also dated. In her book, she details various relationships that she had in the early parts of her career. One of the relationships she discusses was with the man who she referred to as Johnny T in her book. His real identity is rapper Eric B. Johnny T's status was way bigger than the R&B singer who attacked me. Johnny T was very private. He only gave me his pager number, but I didn't think anything of it at the time because, well, I was dating a famous DJ, and he was with me. Who cares about a number? I started to enjoy my celebrity. I enjoyed everything about being involved with someone who was famous. Looking back, I was just one long, extended booty call for him. We didn't really have a relationship. It was all sex. He didn't realize that I was a cokehead because he didn't really care about me. At this point, he had shown his true colors. He had borrowed money under the guise it was for a birthday present for his daughter. I realized, financially speaking, he was not all that he was cracked up to be. In her book, Wendy alleges that Eric cheated, racked up her credit cards, and impregnated her. After a year of dating, the two would split, leaving Wendy with debt and a positive EPT test. He left me with the seed growing in my body. I knew what I wanted to do at that point. I had always been pro-choice. And while I had never been pregnant, I had always prepared for it. I made my appointment at a clinic in Manhattan. Was I scared? No. I felt no connection to the baby, which was about 6 weeks into developing. I looked at it as a little lima bean. I didn't feel like it was my child. There was no emotional attachment to it or to the father at this point. Hell, I felt more connected to the coke that was waiting for me when I got home. When it was done, I felt nothing emotionally. I was numb. I never shed a tear. I never called him back, and I never looked back.
Back then, I'm trying to build this up, Luke, to say that it wasn't like I was like some scrub.
No, you're never going to be you're never a scrub.
Okay, so girls, and Luke and D-Lee, I only took his pager number because that's all he would give me. So obviously he was cheating on me. That's the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
Second thing is that although we used to have good times together and go out on some great dates and stuff, a lot of his visits to my apartment would be like after 2:00 in the morning, and I would just accept it because the rapper's in the studio. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I also know that they use that a lot in terms of cheating.
Right.
The third
It wasn't you. It wasn't you. It was them.
Absolutely. And that's why I don't blame myself.
No,
and I'm
you can't.
glad I went through this.
You cannot blame yourself.
And the third thing, and probably the most vile thing, is that he'd never used condoms, and I accepted that.
Yeah, it wasn't you. Because you were fully into the relationship.
You know, Luke, I don't know what I was fully into. And I wasn't fully into the relationship like that because I always knew that I'd never wanted to be with a rapper on that level. And I don't know, maybe there was just like an air of excitement or something like that. You know, we used to jet to Atlantic City and go out to Las Vegas, and most of the time it was me paying for it, believe it or not. And I couldn't, I know. They
Don't worry, it's
had
okay.
that CD out at that time called Juice. Know the Ledge? Remember that was their last?
What's that word when you're busting loose?
I know.
Don't worry, it's okay.
And
See, I'm
can I
glad
say
now
this
you feel a lot better that you got that out of you.
No, let me just add one more thing
No
to make me
problem,
the
no
ultimate
problem.
sucker.
Please continue.
I would always be forced to go downtown, girls.
Eric B. would later publicly speak out and address Wendy's claims.
During the film, Eric B. was portrayed as a trifling, broke boyfriend who not only cheated on her during the course of their roughly 1-year relationship, but also used her solely for monetary gain. At one point in the movie, the fictional Williams even suggested that Eric B. needed either a rental or Williams' car to get around. On Sunday, January 31st, the veteran turntablist and Blue Bloods actor shared a throwback photo to his Instagram account showing him standing next to a white Rolls Royce with the words, "Damn, I need a rental," written across the top. The vanity license plate reads Eric B7, making it clear the luxury car belonged to him. He wrote in the caption, "Too hilarious, I laughed too. Well, it made for great TV, but the truth is something different. Try that." According to Wendy Williams' account in the film, she aborted their child shortly after their relationship ended. As far back as 1999, Wendy has been accusing Eric B of numerous infractions.
Though the relationship with Eric B didn't work out, Wendy would still be on the lookout for love. Not long after she ended things with the rapper, Wendy moved on. The next relationship she details in her book is with her first husband. In her autobiography, she calls him Robert Morris III, but his real name is Bert Girigori. Quote, "He somehow managed to break through. I bumped into him in the hallway at work. I noticed him immediately because of his size. 6'3", about 300 pounds, solid, just the way I like my men. He was exactly what I was looking for in a man at the time. He was older, nearly 40, more mature, more stable, or so I thought. He was big and attractive. His only problem was his jacked up teeth, but I figured those could be fixed." After 8 months of secretly dating, the couple got engaged and wed in 1994. Everything seemed perfect until they got to the honeymoon. According to Wendy, Bert began displaying very concerning behavior. "We fought the entire time on our honeymoon. He didn't like what I was wearing, or he felt like I was wearing too much makeup, or he didn't like my hair. It was so petty. When we got home, we kissed and made up, but then the fighting began again. We fought about how I dressed. We fought about the appearances I made at clubs late at night. There was a lot of jealousy from him. He was the low-level account executive at the studio, getting a fraction of what I was making." After an awful fight where Bert allegedly spit in Wendy's face, the couple separated in 1994 and ultimately divorced in 95. They were married for 5 months. Bert would later speak to Radar Online about their relationship. In 2019, he told the outlet the following, quote, "It was very bizarre. She just turned into a different person. I don't know what was going on. I didn't understand a lot of things that she did. I didn't understand what her motivations were. I know she said she was doing drugs, but she kept that away from me. I assumed that she was, but I didn't know anything about it. I know I was seeing strange behavior and behavior that I didn't understand when I look back at it." Bert would also allege that after he and Wendy divorced, there were rumors going around saying that she cheated on him and had an affair with a prominent rapper at the time.
Bert also says that after they had divorced, he heard rumors about Wendy stepping out with other men on him. He says, several people came to me with stories about her being with other people. She would stay out all night and didn't offer any explanation, and that pissed me off. Bert says that he later learned that Wendy was having an affair with someone prominent in the entertainment and media industry, but he refused to identify the now married man.
Upon her divorce, Wendy moved on with her life and focused on her career. It was the mid-90s, and things were beginning to take off. At this point, MS Broadcasting bought out Kiss FM and put Wendy back on Hot 97. Wendy was considered the it girl in town and was previously dubbed Billboard Magazine's Radio Personality of the Year. Quote, I was becoming bigger and bigger. There were articles written about me. I was in the spotlight. I had become that girl. I was talking that ish that everybody wanted to hear. On the radio, I was becoming Queen of New York. As Wendy's career began to ascend, she would meet Kevin Hunter, a young man who was rough around the edges. Quote, I met Kevin back in the spring of 1994 at Skate 22 in Union, New Jersey. He was there with Mr. C, a local DJ. Big Daddy Kane was performing that night, and I was there on an appearance for Hot 97. After exchanging numbers at the party, Wendy paged Kevin on April 8, 1994. She wrote, he called right back, and the first thing I noticed was his sexy, raspy voice. I told him who I was and said, look, I get off at 6 o'clock. You can meet me downstairs after my shift. If not, fine. We don't need a formal date for you to impress me.
I was about to be 30. I met Kevin April 6th, 1994. And we met at a kiddie skating rink where DJ Mr. C was doing the music.
You know, at that time, we used to carry like big cases of records. And I had my mutual friend ask Kev to drive me around, and Kev used to start driving me around at parties. And I was DJing, and Wendy was the host.
And one of his friends passed his number to me. He didn't even come over to me. This was not my first time at the rodeo, but there was something very civilized about him within the hood thing. I found it hustler hot. Rough around the edges, my type. About 2 days later, I called Kev and I said, look, I get off at 6. Here's the address. And he said, okay. And when I got done, he picked me up. He smelled good. He looked good. He was cute. He was polite. He was on time right there at the radio station. And I saw the crisp in brand new clothes. You know how you know clothes have just been purchased? They have the creases. I was like, oh, he went all out. Okay. By the first traffic light, I knew I liked him. By the second traffic light, I knew I liked him. Pardon me. By the time we crossed the Brooklyn Bridge, I was like, all right now, this is something special. We liked the same music. We liked the same food. He had a great sense of humor. I had the better sense of humor. I usually do. And that was that.
When Wendy met Kevin, he was everything she had been looking for in a man. She writes in her book that she was looking for a thug, and a thug he was. Wendy quickly fell in love. It was the summer of '94, and after a couple of dates, she took Kevin home to meet her parents. Their relationship progressed rapidly, and Wendy found herself struggling to balance her relationship with him and her relationship with the white lady, Coke. Quote, as we got more serious, it became a task for me to keep my dates with the white lady and Kevin. It became tough to juggle. I had to strategize. On one of our first dates, he talked to me about the streets and seeing what things like crack had done to people. He talked about death and destruction. My break from my habit wasn't cold turkey. I slowly weaned myself off the stuff to the point where one day I woke up and I just didn't have the desire to do it anymore.
Kev had a major influence on Wendy, and part of that major influence is probably getting her to stop using. Kevin definitely he came around at the right time. Kevin and Wendy happened like fast. Like prior to her meeting Kevin, I never seen her with any man. I never seen her talking to a dude or being involved with anybody or anything like that. So when I seen Kevin corner her up, I just was like, what is happening over there? Immediately when Kevin and Wendy started seeing each other, Kev started promoting parties with himself, Wendy as the host, and me as the DJ. So like 95 to like 97, we used to run New York. We would bring like Jay-Z there, Foxy Brown, Biggie, Junior Mafia. You know, we had a lot of fun with it. That whole run elevated all three of us. I think Kevin and Wendy met at the perfect time. I think they had a lot of bedroom talks of how they can just elevate and how they can just get bigger and bigger and bigger.
In her book, Wendy details how Kevin was a positive influence in her life during a very dark period. With his help, she was able to clean up her act and get sober. Her sobriety would then open the door to the next phase in their relationship, engagement. In the summer of '97, Kevin popped the question. Wendy's life was heading in a very positive direction. Her career was on the rise, she was in love, and it all seemed well. But not long after announcing her engagement, Wendy's career took a hit when she received a tip about a closeted gay rapper. I was at a photo shoot one day. The photographer was a lesbian. She handed me a magazine called One Nut. She flipped it open and asked me to read this one particular article. I started reading it and I said, this is very interesting. I'm bringing this to the radio. The article talked about a gay rapper, which was something I had seen frequently in this business. But this article totally explained the ins and outs, so to speak, of the gay lifestyle and the whole controversy behind a gay rapper. So I brought it to the station and read it over the air. Wendy was known for blowing the lid on celebrities. She was known for having a big mouth and exposing public figures. Her audience loved when she dished the dirt. Though Wendy's mouth made her a lot of money, it would also get her into a lot of trouble when she implied and insinuated that certain rappers were gay. She made comments about Tupac, Diddy, Eric Sermon, and Q-Tip, to name a few. This gay rapper thing jumped off. After I read the article on air, everybody wanted to know who the gay rapper is. My popularity was intense because the industry was changing. Artists were marking their territory. Lyrics were getting more and more violent. Rappers were going platinum, selling 1 million albums. No one was exempt from my yapping. And the listeners loved to hate me, but they were listening. And that was fueling it and made me keep going even more. I had a website that featured pictures of some high-powered executives and a rapper in a compromising position. I was talking about the relationship, making implications, coming right out and dishing all the dirt. I was telling it all about everybody. No one was exempt.
There were lots of homosexuals in hip hop back in the 80s too. That was what's worse, hip hop wearing skirts or hip hop being closeted and having a plethora of kids to prove manhood that, and denial of something that you shouldn't have to deny, which is your sexuality. So I hear what Jamar is saying, but we come from a very homosexual era of hip hop as well. There was a radio personality once upon a time. Her name was Wendy Williams, and she was practically burned at the stake for talking about such. And now it's all come full circle. There were many situations, none of which to talk about, but there were many situations back in the day in my career. And it's all coming full circle now. So
Wendy's commentary on closeted gay rappers became a hot topic on her show. Though it brought her a lot of attention, it would also cause severe issues with her peers and prominent figures in the industry. Upon a confrontation with a coworker, Wendy's career was put on the chopping block. This confrontation would have a domino effect and ultimately cost Wendy her job at Hot 97. Quote, There was a piece printed in the gossip section of the New York Daily News about one of my coworkers' then boyfriend. I read it over the air, giving my usual uh-huhs and woo child pleases, and making implications about his sexuality. After I read the piece, adding my 2 cents, I hear all this screaming in the hallway. My coworker approached me screaming, "You always talking to him, blah, 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 blah." There was yelling and girly shoving, but no fist, no blows, and no blood.
Angie Martinez.
Right. Yeah, and she said, but they had different styles of reporting. Now they're saying now Miss Williams became famous for airing out people's dirty laundry, while Angie, honey, took a more journalistic approach. But what really, honey, broke the fight down there, saying when Wendy decided to go on the show one day, on her show one day, and talk about Angie and the guy she was dating, she went on and said that, my coworker is dating a guy that she didn't want nobody to tell, but she wound up saying that Angie was dating Q-Tip at the time. And, honey, Miss Williams also went on to say, honey, she asked a question. She said, honey, she was talking about, honey, isn't it somehow women who like men who like men?
Wendy's fight with Angie Martinez would land her in the boss's office. At that point, they were fed up. The higher-ups at Wendy's station began receiving pressure from powerful people in the industry to shut her up. Her altercation with Angie would be the straw that broke the camel's back. Quote, "The so-called fight with Angie was the last straw for my bosses. Actually, it was an opportunity for them. They had been getting pressure from powerful people in the industry to shut me up. The best way to sum it up is Sean Puffy Combs, aka Diddy, was a very powerful man back then. And while he was not necessarily more sensitive than anyone else I singled out for gossip, he was wealthier and more powerful. One day, I was called into the boss's office and told I would be taken off air if I did not change my style. Which was not happening. They were asking me to become something different. I wasn't trying to hear it or sit out like some first grader being punished. Instead, I sued them, and I packed up my stuff and moved to Philly.
Puff got one of the hottest DJs off of Hot 97 because she wanted to put up a picture of him getting his pants pulled down. You understand what I'm saying? Puff had power. We were in Cancun, and we were on our way to the Island of Women. You understand? And this is all it was, bruh. For whatever reason, dude was playing with Puff. He went behind him and grabbed his trunks and pulled them down. When he grabbed his trunk to pull them down, some girls was taking pictures. They took that picture and emailed it back to Wendy Williams. Wendy Williams said she had him in a compromising position and like it was gay or something like that. And she was going to put it out. So they stopped her from putting it out.
And they got her fired from High 97 because of that.
We were in California at the time. And Puff was shooting a layout for either Rolling Stones or he was shooting a layout for either Rolling Stone or Billboard when he had the white suit on. I was the one who put him in the damn pool. What happened was that Wendy had somehow shown people that email. You hear me? She's shown people that email. Puff told Hot 97 if they didn't get rid of her, you understand, before he got back in New York, that they was not going to get any music from any of his friends, any of the record labels executives that was cool with him. Everybody was going to boycott their station. We was out in LA for about 3 days before we landed back in New York. Wendy Williams was in the radio station in Philly. It was over for her. She was fired.
I was able to find the lawsuit that Wendy referenced in her book. I'll put the documents on the screen. As you can see here, Wendy filed a complaint against Emmis Broadcasting Company on December 22, 1997 for breach of contract. A few months later, the case was settled on March 26, 1998. When it comes to a settlement agreement, the public typically isn't privy to the terms of that agreement. But as you can see here, the case was settled. It must also be noted that this case is sealed, which means that its contents are not available to the public. When Wendy was let go from Hot 97, she relocated to Philly and resumed her career, and right beside her was her fiancé, Kevin, who at that point was also her part-time manager. Upon arriving in Philly, Wendy got some exciting news. She was pregnant. Unfortunately, though, Wendy suffered a miscarriage, the first of many. Less than 2 months later, they were pregnant again. But in September 1998, 4 months into the pregnancy, they lost the baby. Thinking that God wouldn't allow them to have a child due to the fact that they weren't married, Wendy and Kevin wed on November 30th, 1998, at the New Jersey courthouse. They concluded that if they were married, God wouldn't subject them to any more miscarriages since they were doing it the right way. In April 1999, I found out I was pregnant again. I was in my 4th month and everything was going well. The baby was kicking and I shared every movement and joy with my listeners. I was starting to feel excitement. One day, while out shopping, I started to feel a sharp pain. We went to the hospital and they checked me in. I was in the hospital for approximately a week, and the doctors forced delivery. The baby was dead inside me the entire week. I didn't want to know the sex of the baby, but a nurse told me anyway. On the way out of the hospital, one of the nurses handed me a hospital folder, which I assumed was the bill with all of the charges from my stay. I opened it, and it was the records of my baby girl, including her little footprints. I dumped the entire folder in the garbage at the curb. I didn't want that kind of memory. I wanted nothing. They asked me if I wanted to name her. I told them no. I wanted to die. Hey, didn't I do the right thing? I was clean. I was living right. Hell, I had even gotten married. I made all my doctor's appointments. I was taking it easy, and it didn't matter. Here I have this near-perfect guy with so much life and so young, and here I am, damaged and cannot give him a child. I was failing my husband.
The entire city saw me have 2 5-month miscarriages, and I was out doing public appearances with a burgeoning belly, and I had to deliver the babies like with that epidural and the push. And the nurses, they said, "Do you want to know if it's a boy or a girl?" I said, No. "Do you want a funeral or what do you want?" I said, "Just go. Just go."
I just remember that it became so difficult because there was that feeling of, am I ever going to be able to do this? God is punishing me, for talking about people. There were all of these philosophical reasons why she felt it was happening.
At one point, she wanted to end the marriage because she didn't feel as though she was woman enough for her husband because she couldn't, bear a child. Kevin, he was very reassuring, saying, "Look, we don't need a kid." But Wendy didn't want to hear that. You could see her sometimes come in and she was just broken down.
The people relate to me so much. Well, Tanya, it's just real living.
When she was going through her miscarriages, the fans were very empathetic toward her. That's when the dynamic changed in terms of people, not particularly caring for her to loving her.
Wendy's multiple miscarriages really took a toll on her mental, emotional, and physical health. So much so that she even contemplated divorcing Kevin and setting him free. To distract herself from these thoughts, Wendy focused on work and becoming the #1 radio personality nationally. But just a few short months later, in November 1999, Wendy would be in for a surprise. One day, after randomly craving sushi, Wendy found out she was pregnant. Due to her past miscarriages, her doctor ran several tests and discovered that her cervix was weak and couldn't support the weight of a baby. In order to fix this, Wendy had a procedure done to close her cervix. This procedure would prevent and or delay preterm birth. Upon having this procedure, Wendy was put on bed rest and worked from home. Quote, Kevin and I decided we were going to do everything in our power to make sure we kept this baby. We decided there would be no sex. Not because the doctor ordered it, but that's what we elected to do. We had a housekeeper and we hired an assistant who would run errands. There was nothing for me to do but watch TV, shop, and eat. I was eating anything. There were no limits. I was a blob. I had gained more than 100 pounds. And oh yeah, I gave birth to a perfect, healthy baby boy on August 18th, 2000. My beautiful baby arrived 1 week overdue. Kevin Samuel Hunter.
After my second 5-month miscarriage, we finally got successfully pregnant with young Kevin. I wasn't scared. I got pregnant again, but this time I told my radio station I want to stay on bed rest, the whole time. And my bosses were ass. They were like, oh, really? I said, yes. I've been working for you all this time. I had 2 5-month miscarriages. They were like, oh, okay, well, we'll put the equipment in your house. I was like, geez, thank you.
We had all the engineers bring all the equipment to our home. And she did it from bed.
Even though I was pregnant, I kept the show running. It was fine. It was fine. And boom, through determination, we had Kev.
With the birth of her beloved son, thriving career, and wonderful marriage, Wendy's life was perfect. In her eyes, it couldn't get better than this. But one night, when Kevin Jr. was about a month old, something strange happened that would forever change Wendy's life. One evening, Kevin's cell phone was ringing. It was 2:00 in the morning. Kevin looked at it and ignored it the first time. It rang about 20 seconds later and Kevin picked it up and hung up. That was a little unusual. It rang again. He did the same thing. It kept ringing, and finally he picked up the phone and left the room. I got out of bed and followed him to the guest bedroom. I stood in the doorway and listened for a few seconds. I don't remember the content of the conversation, but all I remember is Kevin saying this woman's name. For him to be calling another woman by her name led me to believe that this person was closer than just a business associate. I walked in and snatched the cell phone out of his hand. What the F is going on? I said in a nasty growl. He actually answered right away. He spilled the beans. Kevin had been having an affair.
I wake up like 2:00 in the morning to go to the bathroom. I just delivered him 2 months ago. And Big Kev wasn't in the bed. And then I walked into young Kev's nursery to, my baby. And I hear my husband talking greasy on the phone in one of the guest rooms. He was clearly talking to a girl. And then I lose it and jump into the room. I say, what's going on? He told me it was some girl, some bank teller he met at a bank. He's ending it and so on and so forth. And I honestly believe that. This is my husband. And we had a baby. And I don't know how to be a mother. What do I do with this? I wanted this, but what do I do now? You're not going to leave me alone. Hold on. Let me just straighten up. Okay. Camera guys. This is so disgusting. Let me just get myself together. So disgusting.
When Wendy found out about Kevin's affair, she went into damage control. The first thing she did was hire a private detective to track his mistress down. She found out her name, where she lived, where she worked, if she had any kids, and whether or not she was married. Wendy even took a trip to this woman's place of employment to confront her in person. Kevin's affair rocked Wendy's world and turned it upside down. In her most vulnerable moment, pregnant with his child and on bed rest, her husband of several years was having an affair. When it came to light, Wendy was bewildered and didn't know what to do. She had a newborn son and did not want to be a single mother. Quote, during this period while the baby was brand new, I was in no condition to be a single mother, mentally or physically. Physically, Being 100 pounds overweight, I didn't really feel like I could go back on the market. I didn't feel like a swarm of men would be stepping over each other to get to me. Nothing makes a woman feel good like being sought after by a bunch of men. The way I physically looked affected the way I felt. The fact that he had an affair and I was not able to confidently whip off my clothes and whip it on him was driving me crazy. I was stuck with Kevin until I could get myself together. So what did Wendy do? Well, she got a tummy tuck, liposuction, and redid her breast implants. In her book, she writes that by the time she got herself together physically and emotionally, they were back together and mentally in sync. I have tried to understand why he cheated. I understand that sometimes a man just needs a vessel, and you can take that for what it is. As far as the affair is concerned, it was the first time it had ever happened, and it was the best thing that ever happened to us. Kevin and I are a stronger couple today. When my husband keeps late hours and I'm not with him, I don't worry about where he is. When he pulls up at 4 a.m, my mind does not dwell on what B he is effing. I'm not worried that he's coming from some woman's house. He knows the deal, and so do I. There are men who learn from their mistakes, and my husband is one of them. I never thought about cheating on him as a way to get back at him. What would that prove? That would prove to my son that I'm a whore. There is a double standard. Men can cheat and can come back from it. When women do it, we are branded all kinds of things. I accept that. So I chose to believe him, trust him, and I chose to stay. I don't know any men who could put it down the way my husband does. I used to have a cheat and I'm breaking this off rule, but my husband cheated on me after we got married, not before. Looking back, had he cheated on me before marriage and before the baby, I don't know what I would have done. Cheating is one of those things where you have to be in the situation to be able to say what you would do. Now I have a modified rule. Cheating that produces a baby or an STD is a reason to break it off. My man is a special man. I love him to death despite his mistakes. We've moved on. My husband made a mistake, but I never questioned his love for me. He's mine, and I won.
If you told me when I was 25 years old or 30 years old that that I would stay around for a cheater, I would have been like, you's a lie. You are lying. I've got way too much to offer a man to stick around for him cheating on me. At that particular time, I had my career in radio. I was making a great salary. I had vacation property, of my very own, and the world was my oyster. So I definitely thought I wasn't staying around for some cheating. But I did. And I don't regret it. And I do think it's a double standard with cheating. I think that you men are just sometimes so Neanderthal that you could never put up with your woman cheating. A man putting paws on your meat. For people who do cheat, unless you are busted, cold busted, take it to your grave. So don't get all Mother Teresa on me and start confessing. Tretching them on Naughty by Nature said it the best. Do your dirt all by your lonely. Don't tell your friends what you're up to. If you need some strange, then, and I'm not condoning it, but all I'm saying is, what is the purpose of telling? Because all you're doing is hurting feelings. Nobody's giving you an award for admitting that you cheated.
So basically what you're saying is that if Kevin cheated again, you just don't want to know about it. You just keep it on the low.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if I cheated on Kevin, right, I would not tell him. If you cheat on your wife, don't tell her. Right. If you are busted, then confess.
In closing out her book, Wendy gives Kevin the floor and allows him to explain his point of view in regards to their marriage and the affair. This is what he had to say. The sex really wasn't the reason why I did what I did. I needed to have an outlet. I was vulnerable and it just happened. It wasn't a big thing. It wasn't a big thing to me. Give me some credit too. Men seem to be able to separate love from sex. For me, the affair was not that serious. It's serious when it becomes a long, drawn-out thing and you're dealing with somebody who doesn't understand. I know it's a double standard, but it's a man's world. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that's how it is. If she did the same thing, I would be gone. She doesn't get a free pass. Absolutely not. No free passes. Yes, I did a slimy thing, but that doesn't make me a slimy person. I love her, and she loves me, and that's where it is, and that's that.
What you do requires, to some level, a little bit of a mean streak.
It requires thick skin.
I informed you that you were fueling rumors by continuing to talk about it, thereby damaging my reputation.
Wendy wasn't getting all of her information from the Star or the National Enquirer. She was getting it from people on the streets.
Is there drug use going on at this present time?
Who are you talking to?
To you, Whitney. You.
No, you're not talking to me. I'm a mother. Only my mother has privy to that information. You talk to your child about that. Don't ask me no questions like I'm a child. You talk to your baby about her, what she gonna be confronting or what she got to deal with.
And
don't ask me like I'm a child, because I'm not a child, Wendy.